manteles largos precisamente porque estamos en la Conferencia Magistral de la Clausura, en esta 12ª Cátedra Patrimonial Internacional de Turismo Sergio Molina y el 16º Foro Internacional en Turismo Guillermo Díaz Zamorano. En esta ocasión, 2 cuerpos académicos han unido esfuerzos precisamente para tener la oportunidad de poder trabajar en el ámbito colegiado y que permita, obviamente, otorgarles a ustedes esta posibilidad de estas ponencias. Y en esta ocasión, dejo en sus manos al doctor Francisco Vibriescas para que presente a nuestro invitado del día de hoy.
Sí, buenos días a todos. Es un honor para mí presentar al doctor Gelman. Voy a tratar de manejarlo un poquito en inglés y en español para que él esté enterado de su resumen. Dr. Avon Gelman is a senior lecturer and head of the Department of Tourism and Hotel Management at Kinneret College on the Sea of Galilee, Israel. Es profesor catedrático y a cargo del Departamento de Turismo y Administración de Hoteles en el College Kinneret del Mar de Galilea en Israel. He is a cultural geographer whose research interest lies in the field of tourism and include international tourism and geopolitical borders, tourism and peace, urban-rural tourism, and host-guest relationships. Él es un distintivo geógrafo donde ha situado su interés en investigaciones dentro del campo de turismo, además en el turismo internacional y fronteras de corte geopolítico. También en turismo y paz, turismo urbano y rural, y sus relaciones entre anfitrión y huésped. His research papers have been published in scientific journals such as Annals of Tourism Research, Tourism Geographies, and Current Issues in Tourism. Sus artículos de investigación han sido publicados en los principales journals científicos como el de Annals of Tourism Research and Tourism Geographics. El Dr. Gelman es revisor y crítico de varios artículos científicos en el campo de turismo. He is also a reviewer for various scientific journals in the field of tourism. He has conducted empirical field studies, developed theories, published more than 30 articles in scientific journals and book chapters, presented at more than 50 international conferences, and receives invitations regularly to speak at conferences and seminars abroad. Él ha dirigido estudios de campo empíricos y ha desarrollado teorías en su especialidad y ha publicado más de 30 artículos científicos y capítulos de libro, más de 50 conferencias internacionales y con invitaciones para ser orador en conferencias en diferentes países. A major context of his research in the tourism area is the development of a theoretical foundation for tourism geopolitical border relations between countries around the world, including the development of global models and theories, especially those with lies to tourism and peace. Su principal contexto en sus investigaciones es el turismo en el desarrollo de las bases teóricas para el turismo geopolítico y en las relaciones de frontera entre países alrededor del mundo, incluyendo el desarrollo de modelos y teorías globales, especialmente aquellas que unen el turismo y paz. Welcome, Mr. Gelman. And then you're gonna see one video made previously for this conference. And ustedes van a ver un video ya hecho por el Dr. Gelman y al final ustedes podrán hacer sus preguntas de preferencia en inglés en el chat y yo las moderaré para entregárselas al Dr. Gelman. Bienvenido. Welcome, Mr. Francisco. Dr. Gelman. Sí.
Thank you so much, Francisco. Thank you very much, Tomas, and all the other organizers for inviting me to give the speech for this important conference. It's a great honor for me. And during my presentation, I will expose to you some of the ideas connecting to tourism and borders in the face of the global emergency challenges and opportunities. So I would like to start my presentation today with this question: what makes borders to become tourist attractions? Different scholars mention that many people, especially tourists, have fascination with borders. Timothy, Professor Dallin Timothy, described the borderlines as a fabrication of human reflection of socio-political values. So I would say that borders or borderline or border region are mostly places that describe kind of contrast. There is differences with what happened in both sides of the border, or what used to happen in both sides of the border. And that's what makes the border so interesting and fascinating for a visitor. In the image, here you can see this couple. This is, they are standing in observation point in Israel, in the north of Israel, northeast Israel, very near to the border with Syria. And they are overlooking to the other side of the border. And I think later on I will mention more about what happened there. So actually, let's try to understand some of the things which are connecting to the borders from the perspective of the governments or from the political side. So government actually are using several kind of administrative things like passport, like visa, currency, or even certification, which are proving your health. I think nowadays, following the times of the COVID-19, we will be more, I hope soon, the vaccine will come. And I guess that after there will be a vaccine for the COVID-19, many countries will check your vaccine certification to make sure that you took the vaccine. So actually, these are examples how countries managing or trying to manage the tourism movement, tourism mobility, and these ways are very useful to control and to manage it. Here you can see a typology, types of tourism attractions. Professor Timothy and myself developed this typology a few years ago, and there are some examples. I will mention those examples or some of the examples soon. But in general, there are three main reasons or three main attractions for tourists to visit near to or around the border. The first one is the subject of the border. It might be geopolitical subject, historical, heritage, or position on Earth. The second one is the location and the environment. If the nature is very interesting or the culture around the border is very unique. And the last one, the third one, is the development. So the development can be, for instance, casino or shopping tourism. For instance, the Mexican border cities, most of them developed shopping tourism for a lot of Americans which are crossing the border to buy things in Mexico or to go to the dentist or buy services or whatever. Okay, so but many of the places, many of the tourism attractions, the border tourism attractions, they have a combination which include more than one of those reasons. Sometimes it might be two of them or three of them, and there are a lot of combinations. Okay. So the first example I want to mention today is this example, Four Corners, a monument. Maybe some of you heard about that. It's in the United States of America. And this is the border in the middle of the desert, the border between Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. It's four 4 states, and someone decided to create a monument to sign the borders on ground. And at the moment that this have been done, this place become very attractive for visitors. People are driving hundreds of kilometers just to visit 4 states in the same time, like this gentleman in the picture. If you Google by yourself 4 corners, you will find plenty of images, very interesting and very funny images that people are taking to show the experience they have in the border. So this, for instance, the father and the son visiting together all the 4 places, and we have many of those examples. The second example is the Great Wall in China, one of the most famous tourism attraction on earth. This is a very crowded attraction. Millions of visitors are coming there every year. And you can see how it looks on the wall. Some of the tourism, which I talked about the experience of visiting the Great Wall, told me, we've been there, very interesting, but never again, because it's so crowded. So many people are coming there. You can see it in the picture as well. And this is an example of a heritage border tourism attraction, very unique, very important. By the way, you can see that it's not it's a very wide wall, and a lot of people can climb on it. And when the rain is started, it becomes really, really difficult, because many of the people want to go back, and then it becomes so crowded. Okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
I also want to say a few words about the term of border and globalization. This term is extremely important. The age of globalization is making a lot of changes. Mostly, we can talk about much more openness around and much more possibilities for tourism mobility, tourism border crossing. It becomes much easier, okay? The other term that I want to mention in connection to tourism and globalization is supernationalism. It means organization like EU in Europe or NAFTA, which actually in Europe, for instance, the EU, if you go from Israel or from Mexico to visit several countries in Europe, actually the border control will be only one time when you get inside. So if you took a flight from Mexico to Lisbon, Portugal, for instance, you will have a border control with your passport only one time when you get inside, and then you can visit as much as you want many other countries which are belonging to the EU. And the second time that you will have the passport control, and when you leave Europe, you can leave Europe from any other country. So actually, for the tourists all over Europe, all the space of EU managed like one country when it considered to crossing border. So this is amazing. I mean, globalization is giving us a lot of new options for developing tourism and for the free mobility of border crossing in many places. So just to give one example, for instance, this is the highway. A few years ago, I went to visit in Slovakia in Europe, but I took the flight to Vienna in Austria. And from the Vienna airport, it was only 1 hour to get to Slovakia. And the road was free. I didn't need to do any procedure of border crossing or whatever. I just went there. So today we are this is globalization. This is a good example of globalization. But from the other side, I want also to mention today another term, which is, I would call it Balkanization from the Balkan countries. The Balkanization process is the opposite, actually, from what we just mentioned about tourism and globalization. Because if you talk about the Balkan countries, the 7 Balkan countries, all of them used to be former Yugoslavia, one country, but nowadays each one of them is independent. Okay, here you can see a picture from the border between Croatia and Montenegro. And a few years ago, I was traveling by car, visited all of them, and crossed the borders. And one of the main results from this from field trip was that each one of the countries is managing the border very well, and you have to experience border control, to show your passport and have the proceeding whatever you cross the borders in the Balkans. So this is an example of the opposite process. So sometimes we can mention this. This is another example of a kind of Balkanization process. A few years ago, when many refugees escaped from Syria, they came through Turkey, and then they wanted to go to other countries in Europe. But for instance, Hungary, they closed the border. They didn't want to let the refugees go inside to Hungary. And this is a picture from the news. You can see the refugees waiting near to the gate, but they can't cross the border. So in cases of refugees, in cases of security issues, of wars, or in cases of health crisis like nowadays, COVID-19 caused to many, actually most of the countries, or all of the countries, closed the borders, at least for a period. In Israel, they closed the airport and they closed the borders, and in many other places. So this is amazing what happened now, which is very unusual following the event of the COVID-19. This is another very interesting example from the Norwegian-Russian border in the north. When I traveled there, I was fascinating to see that in the Norwegian side, you don't see much army forces or any security landscape. But the minute you cross to the Russian side, you see a lot of it. You can see some of the pictures from there, those guarding towers and fences and army forces. So for the Russian, this is, it looks like they're waiting for a war. In the Norwegian side, it doesn't look like that. So this is also kind of surrealistic scene for tourists if they're crossing the borders in those kind of places. And a very fascinating example from the border between Canada and the USA, the 49th parallel in the north of USA. Actually, I'm sure you're all aware to the fact that after September 11 security agenda, what we call today September 11 security agenda started, and borders, airport and other border passage become start to manage a very strict and very serious security regulations. In this border, there is this is United States, but the road that you see is actually Canada. So it looks like an open border, but no fence. If you see these stones here in the beginning in the front of the image, these stones here, this is the border. There is a sign here that it's forbidden. It's forbidden to cross the border. Someone might think that it's free for passage, for crossing, but it will be a big mistake because both sides, the Americans and the Canadians, are watching this border very carefully. There's a lot of cameras, like you see here in the picture, and also you can see this picture, underground cameras and helicopters above, and so they are managing the border very well. The main reason for it is that they are watching and they are trying to fight against smuggler, mostly drug smuggler, and mostly by night. So here I have a small story for you, especially for you, about border tourism attractions. If you see this nice White House here in the picture, very near, only a few meters from the border. The borders, to remind you, are the stones here. This gentleman here, the owner, established a guest house and bed and breakfast, and the name of the guest house is Smuggler Inn Guest House or bed and breakfast, and he invite the visitor to I would say kind of dark tourism, to stay overnight, and by night they can sit in the balcony and they might watch the activity. They might watch the helicopters and the police forces, the border police forces running after smugglers. So this is kind of strange, unusual attraction, but this is also sometimes happens around the borderland. I just want you to notice, I want to mention that in many cases, the features of political boundaries, like flags, like highway welcome signs, or customs buildings, those features, in many cases, they become an exciting attraction for the tourists. They would like, in many cases, to take pictures with this background of the flags, maybe the flags of both countries, or they would like to take a picture with the sign. So this is very typical landscape and very typical excitement of tourism border visiting. From now on, I want to focus my presentation and to present to you three types or three case studies for tourism attractions as a space of presenting and symbolizing peace. All of them, of course, border tourism attraction. And I will describe shortly each one of those types of borders. And then I will give you some case studies to see how it works on ground. So the first one, I call it type A. Type A is one-side border tourism attractions. Type B is formally closed and fortified border tourism attraction, and type C is a trans-border peace parks. Okay, so let's start from the first one. Type A, a one-side border tourism attraction as a space of presenting and symbolizing peace. This is a very famous model of a scholar with the name Matnetzer. And you can see here in the middle, this is the draw of one side border tourism. Actually, it's described a case that the borders are very close and very fortified. So there is no peace agreement between the countries. In most cases, there is a war or quiet war. Army forces are near to the border. Each country is guarding, watching the border all the time. And in many cases, there is an history of wars and fighting along the border. Like I showed you before, I mentioned before the border between Israel and Syria in the north of Israel. Okay, so just to mention few of the idea which might be connected to the tourist experience when they are visiting border attraction. I would call it to one-side border tourism or borders, close border, borders which with political issues. Okay, so there is always there will be the history knowledge about the places. Sometimes it's the battlefield, okay, or the wars or the events which happened there in the past or in the present. The memory might be collective memory, society memory, or individual memory if people were involved somehow with what happened around the border region. Symbolicity might be there. Shortly, I will show you some examples of this symbolicity of landscape, physical landscape, as well as, of course, historical memories. Okay, and all those ideas together might be fascinating for the travelers, for the tourists which are coming to visit those places. Okay. So the case study I want to use is from the Israeli and the north of Israel border, mostly the Syrian-Israeli or Syrian and Lebanon. Both of them are countries that Israel doesn't have any peace agreement yet, unfortunately. And I will use this model which I developed in one of my studies a few years ago. It's the fear and hope model. And this model is trying to describe in a very clear way those experiences of the visitors, which when they are coming to visit the one-side border tourism attraction. Okay, so in many cases, people can stand in one side. Let's say they are standing in the Israeli side, and they're looking to the other side, like the Syrian or the Lebanon side. And they can, for instance, they can think about maybe hope for better time, for peace agreement. Maybe they can hope that one day they will be able to cross and visit the other side of the border and meet the people there. But also in the same time, people will think about the heritage of the place, the danger, the wars, the security issues. So it will be connected to fear experiences. So actually, we are talking about kind of mixture between both of them, the hope and the fear on the same time, in the same visit, in the same destination, in the same border tourism attraction. Shortly, I will give you some examples of how it works. And now we are coming back to our couple from the beginning, if you remember. So they are observing, are they feeling that they are observing to the enemy, to the Syrian side? In that case, they might experience more fear, more dark experience or whatever. But if they are talking about maybe hoping for a future peace agreement, for a future visiting in Damascus, in Syria, whatever, okay, so here we can see this mixture between both ideas of fear and hope together. So actually this attraction, the same attraction, is a bunker. this bunker used to be a place for fighting, okay? And the last war in the Golan Heights was in the 70s. It's not so far, but nowadays the army is not using it anymore. And a few years ago, they transferred the place from an army bunker to a tourist attraction. And it's open for visitors, so people can visit, they can learn about the heritage of the place, they can do observation, also to both, to the border, the Syrian border, but also to the Lebanese one, and even to the Jordanian one, which is not too far. And there are a lot of experiences for them, okay? Sometimes they can experience and think and or learn or listen to explanation about the battles and the wars and this side, and sometimes they can just enjoy the place today, okay? This group, American group, for instance, they now they are looking to the north, to the direction of the Lebanese border, and the guide is explaining about past and present in the region, okay? This is part of the design of the attraction, of the tourist attraction. So there are those signs with the distances in kilometers to each one of the neighboring capital city, Amman in Jordan, Baghdad in Iraq, Damascus in Syria, Jerusalem in Israel. So just to see that we are so close physically one to each other, and maybe to think about more hope if we are talking about hoping for peace with the neighboring countries. You can get inside to the bunker and look from here to the other side of the border. Here you can see the United Nations camp. And okay, to see children visiting, playing, and inside the bunker, it's actually I would say kind of optimistic scene that this place is not for war anymore, it's just a place for kids, they can enjoy the time there. Also, if we look about these art pieces, open museum sculpture, which have been done from former army tools and war tools. Now it's just for art, so we can think about it in a symbol way, as a positive thing of non-violent in the border anymore. Or this tank, which is not useful anymore, just for memory and just for local heritage. Now let's go together and talk about the second type, type B, formally closed and fortified border, which transferred to tourism attractions as a space of presenting and symbolizing peace. So what is the difference between one-side border tourism attraction to formally closed and fortified borders? Actually, I'm talking about borders which are nowadays absolutely open. Nowadays, tourists can cross and visit easily, okay? But the heritage of the past is still very significant and even very important for the visitor experiences and curiosity, okay? I would say that maybe the best example for this type is the Berlin Wall, because the Berlin Wall is a symbol not only for the German people. The Berlin Wall used to divide Berlin between the East Germany and West Germany. But it's kind of a global symbol of freedom for all Europe, for all over the world. So actually, the number one attraction in Berlin is the Berlin Wall. every tourist which is coming to visit Berlin would like to see the Berlin Wall. And what happened that tourists came to visit Berlin, and they were looking for the wall, but they couldn't see the wall. Why they couldn't see the wall? Because the wall was destroyed by the people in the end of the 90s when the wall fell, and they didn't want to see any wall anymore, and they just destroyed it, and very, 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 very small part of it remains, but in most cases you can't see it anymore. So they started to mark in Berlin. They started to mark, like you can see here, these stones, 2 lines of stones. They did it specially for the tourism, to show the tourists where the wall used to be in the past. During the 20 years, the wall was standing there between 1961 to 1989. Okay, so so we are talking about a little bit more than 20 years, and this is amazing. You can see they are also writing here the years, and they're writing. It's written in Germany, and this is in German language. So it's specially it was done specially for the tourism business, which is amazing. If you want to visit the Checkpoint Charlie Museum, which is amazing, a fascinating one, if you ask me, this is actually the Checkpoint Charlie, but what you see here, it's not a real soldier. Actually, it's an actor, which doing directed the directed show for the tourists. So this is amazing, because this is a nice example how the tourists become very significant and very important to help to keep the heritage, keep the history, keep the story of the place, the special story of the place, which is so fascinating. So if you come to visit, you can see some pieces of the Berlin Wall. You can buy. This is the #1 souvenir from Berlin, to buy a small piece of stone from the remains of the wall. If it's a small piece, you pay only €5. If you want a bigger one, you need to pay more. And you can see this gentleman here. I told you it's an actor. It's not a real soldier. You can pay some few euro and stamp your passport just for souvenir, for a nice memory. And if you want to take picture with the soldiers near to the Checkpoint Charlie station, you need to pay a few euro for this as well. So you can see how tourism business, tourism souvenir, tourism business are developing sometimes around the border. They are telling the story of the past, the story of the heritage in the place, but they also find the ways to do business. So tourism is a business, and you can produce, if you have those ideas, you can develop those activities. So this is some pictures from Checkpoint Charlie. This is a picture of the museum from outside, and inside it's a small museum, but if you ask me, I will tell you it's a fascinating one. For instance, this is one example from the exhibition. You can see this old Volkswagen, and they showed how people tried to escape and cross the border from the eastern side of Berlin to the west to get their own freedom, and this is how they try to do it. People were ready to do a lot of efforts to escape from the eastern side of the border in those days. And also open museum open museum space here in the streets of Berlin with a lot of pictures and explanations about the past. Golden Triangle in the Southeast Asia is also another fascinating example for type B. It's also a borderland which transferred. It used to be a very close and very dangerous border people couldn't visit because it used to be a huge land of opium growing, and gangster used to control the region to sell this opium all over the world, and but then the countries fight against it, and actually nowadays there is no opium gangsters anymore. And what happened in the Golden Triangle that actually the tourism became the new economy of the region instead of the opium. And nowadays millions of visitors are coming to visit the border, especially the borders between northern Thailand, eastern Myanmar, and western Laos. Okay, and you can experience also the story of the past and the story of the present, and the Mekong River. This is the meeting point between the three borders in the region, and you can also take a boat and boating around and experience border crossing as well from one country to the other. Fascinating, really fascinating. This is an example of the Opium Museum, telling the heritage and the story of the past in the region, those tools for the opium. And this picture is really amazing. From one side, so they're asking the question, Opium King or freedom fighter? The general is the freedom fighter, and the Opium King are actually the enemy, and they are not there anymore. So this was the type B with these two examples. And the last type that I will present shortly is the transborder peace parks as a space of presenting and symbolizing peace. So actually, Waterton Glacier International Peace Park is the first peace park established all over the world in the beginning of the 30s, 1932. And actually, it's a peace park between two friendly countries, USA and Canada. And the idea was to create a big biospherical, ecological region with a free border crossing and managing the space together. So it's encouraged keeping the environment. It's emphasizing the good relationship between the countries. But from the 30s, nowadays we have almost 200 peace parks all over the globe. I think most of them in places like Africa and also in South America. In many cases, the peace parks established between or along borders between countries that used to have wars and fights. And the peace parks is also a way not only to keep the nature together, but also to do something which will help the countries to warm the peace and to have a better relationship. Also to symbolize the peace to other people, to visitors from both countries and visitors from abroad. So this is a very nice idea, which done for nature, but also very much to encourage and to promote peace, actually.
Dr.
So
Galman, Excuse me, we have over time. Is you can
Yes.
try to finish. Oh, we're in the conclusion. Okay.
Yes, I am in the conclusion. So if you can give me 1 more minute, I will conclude shortly. Okay, Francisco? So if we talk in general about all the 3 types, we can see that even we have big differences between the characteristic of each one of them. We talked about one-side border tourism when the border is very close, and we talked about type B of border which used to be closed, but nowadays they are very open. And type 3, we talked about transborder peace parks. In all of them, we can find ways actually to give the visitors, the tourists, an experience of peace as well, in different ways and different activities and different stories and different experiences. Thank you very much for listening to me for my presentation, and I will be more than happy to answer questions if there is still some time for questions. Thank you so much.